Hey everyone, it's Michael MGF, and today I am finally back continuing the Avengers Endgame project, celebrating the end of the Infinity Saga. And after all this time, today I've got the ex-assassin turned Avenger, Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow, and Clint Barton, Hawkeye in his Ronin suit. Now guys, of course, it has been quite a while, and even though I was ready to kick into gear and finish the Endgame project over the fall, a couple of things changed unexpectedly in my life, and that didn't quite work out, but that's okay because Endgame was the end of the MCU as we knew it, and things will never be the same going forward, especially without the original 6 Avengers being together anymore. These are more than likely going to be some of the last figures I'll ever make of these characters, and because of how much I loved the Infinity Saga all those years, this project has always been more about making the best figures I can and not necessarily rushing to say goodbye. But either way, I appreciate all of you bearing with me. 2019 was a really rough year, but I'm here now, and I was actively working on this duo throughout all of January. I'm getting started on Thor and Smart Hulk right after this, and I can't wait for you guys to finally see all of this come together once and for all. With all of that though, let's get back on track with Black Widow and Hawkeye.
An everlasting exchange. A soul for a soul.
Who are you?
Who do you want me to be?
How about a friend?
I used to have nothing. And then I got this. This family. I was an Avenger. See you in a minute.
Natasha Romanoff, Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow in what turned out to be her final suit. Now, this minifigure wasn't really like Cap or Iron Man or Hawkeye, who you just saw, where the whole figure was an overall challenge, but it was mostly targeted areas throughout the figure that presented challenges. So, I mean, the majority of it was just sort of changing up the color palette, trying to keep things as accurate as I could, applying 3D elements for the tasers, designing the shoulders and printing those out in 2 separate layers, gluing those in place and painting all the detail on the arms onto those shoulder pads, or even making the strap this time around was something that I've certainly done before but had to apply a different design in the form of a set of 3 lines and the individual buckle pieces that had to be glued on and painted onto the center of that strap, and then it continues around. You know, all these things are things that you've seen me do before, right? Nothing that is too crazy here, but it really came in the form of just a few other things that presented challenges for making Black Widow's final suit, and namely that began with the hairpiece. I didn't know what hairpiece I was going to go with last year, and then eventually Dragon Brick came out with their custom Black Widow with the perfect hairpiece. Now that is a collector's item figure, not easy to get my hands on. Thankfully, Outside Brick restocked. I got one of the minifigures and had the opportunity to paint it up myself, but that definitely came with the challenge of figuring out how I was going to paint the blonde braids transition into her red hair, and it was hard to not make it look like a cakey, almost strawberry-like mess and actually create that fade, create that transition. It's something I really hadn't attempted since Gamora for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but finally, after many attempts, I think I made it look just right here, and I'm really proud of how that turned out. So that was a challenge. There were some easier things, like just taking the Black Widow head once again, painting a collar around the neck, repainting the lips, which are things I've done before, but then also the legs had a lot of line work. And I'm not talking like Hawkeye. I mean, you look at this and this is just a stack of lines that begins with the thighs and then goes all the way down onto the knees and then wraps around all 4 sides of the minifigure's legs. And now that was tedious. That was challenging and not easy to keep straight, but ultimately I've done this a few times, so I was able to persevere and paint on all the lines. But Natasha's legs, I mean, it was at least 2 or 3 days of on and off work. And once I finished the figure, I actually gave her the exact same pair of pistols that I've given my Black Widow minifigures all along. These really great pistols from Minifig Cat that are actually pretty accurate to the ones that Natasha uses in the MCU. But the accessories that Dragon Brick's Black Widow figure came with were these batons. batons. Now, these are really awesome because these are actually made from resin. These are custom pieces, and I basically took them because they were way too long, and I cut off a couple of the sections on the top, and then I glued some micro magnets to the bottom, painting those over, sealing them in place. I was able to create a bow staff that actually does connect just like in the movies, and I think it turned out looking really, really cool. And really quick, as you can see, clipping one of her hands onto one of the staff pieces, you can see it just looks really, really awesome, and the connection is pretty seamless. I'm so glad the original figure from Dragon Brick came with these for me to use, because I didn't really know what I was going to use for the batons this time around. I just knew I wanted to change things up from the Infinity War figure. Pulling the figure apart really quick, I do want to give you a look at just how this strap functions. It's of course made from Cape Madness fabric, and I essentially just sort of copied the exact same thing that I did for the Infinity War Black Widow, and pretty much kept the design the exact same. Of course, if you pull on it, it is going to tear. It is a fragile piece, but obviously I'm not going to do that, and it does keep itself together and does hold itself together pretty well if you're not too rough with it, and I think it does look really, really awesome, and painting those lines running throughout it was not really that easy, but ultimately definitely worth it in the end, like I said. And also you have these little pistol holsters that are actually made from rubber, and I applied a couple 3D layers onto those and kind of painted more detail onto these holsters than I originally wanted to, and so they're kind of like hyper detailed little holsters just stuck onto the sides of the legs, but I guess considering just how detailed everything looks with the lines, they kind of do still fit in. Either way, I do have the straps painted onto the tops of the Aerialite painted curved torso, and that's really it for Natasha in this final suit. There's a bit of toe detail on the top of each foot if you didn't catch that, and of course I think it is definitely the best Black Widow minifigure I have ever worked on, and I am really proud of the way it turned out, and it's really going to be the last Black Widow minifigure that I make for a really long time that looks like this, because I intend to do her white suit for her solo film coming out. And I think Natasha is by far the most underdeveloped of the original 6 Avengers, so I'm really looking forward to this solo film coming out in May and hopefully making that white suit and Taskmaster. But Scarlett Johansson portrayed Natasha incredibly well all throughout the MCU and all these years since Iron Man 2. It's going to be a shame to finally see Black Widow go once and for all.
Step out that door. You are an Avenger.
You didn't see that coming.
Boys! Laura!
We found something. A chance, maybe.
Don't give me hope.
Clint Barton, Hawkeye in his Ronin suit. I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to do the Ronin suit instead of the regular, more standard suit that he wears for the majority of the film. Even though the Ronin suit only appears in one sequence, I knew that black and gold ninja tactical suit was definitely going to make for the better custom minifigure, and quite possibly the best Hawkeye minifigure I would ever make. And I think that's what I was going for here, and I think that is ultimately what I pulled off. Now, I didn't get started with this head, but the hairpiece on the Clint Barton head was actually made for Avengers Infinity War all the way back in 2018, before we realized he was not in that film, and I decided to basically just hang on to it for whenever I would need it for Avengers 4, and here we are in 2020, way later than I expected, but that's okay. As you can see, it's basically just a sleepy hairpiece with the sides completely removed, and then I sanded over the rough areas, added some smooth paint, painted the whole thing my own brown, added a wash, and then it wound up looking exactly like that goofy hairstyle that Jeremy Renner sports for the entirety of Endgame. And I also painted the sides to sort of look buzzed to really complete the look. And as you can see as well, the likeness to Jeremy Renner, this is by far, I think, one of the best painted faces I have ever made. I am so proud of how this one turned out. The design is inspired by Life Bricks, and as soon as I saw it, I knew that was exactly how I wanted my Hawkeye to look. And it was very tedious and not easy to accomplish, but ultimately, after many hours, I got it down. It was really cool being able to do that because it's just not a face design I was ever able to paint the right way in the past. But now, to get them out of the way, I do want to talk about the new bow and the arrow piece. As you can see, this is definitely the best bow I have ever made for any Hawkeye minifigure I've ever done, because it's essentially the most accurate one I have ever made. Basically what I did was I took a larger Brick Forge bow piece, not the regular recurve bow or whatever I had used in the past. It was these ones that I had used for previous Hawkeye minifigures, these smaller ones. I took a larger model and then I essentially sanded the fronts to make it as smooth and as flat as I could, and then I sculpted onto the back and also created these attachments using various bits of rubber. So it's essentially a center circular piece of rubber on each one of these, and then 4 different individual smaller rubber pieces glued around the sides, and it was not easy to glue those in place. It was not fun, but ultimately worth it. I knew I wanted to go all the way with this bow, and I'm so glad that I did, because it just turned out absolutely perfect and much, much better. So going ahead and removing it though to give you a look at this little arrow piece, it's basically just another Brickforge arrow, but usually in the past I would use these arrows from Brickforge, but I decided to go with this one this time to kind of change it up and add a bit more variety to my Hawkeye minifigures. And now getting a better look at the full Ronin suit, you can see it might be a little bit more complicated than you would have expected, and it certainly was, because looking at the reference, it was definitely very hard to distinguish certain things, figure out how I wanted to portray the fabric and the leather pieces layered and overlapped on top of each other, where I wanted to place fabric, where I wanted to place regular cardstock to essentially get everything looking correct. And I'm really glad that I took the time to do that, because I think I wound up nailing the overall look and keeping it pretty much as accurate as I could. And as you can see, just to go ahead and focus a bit more on the rest of this suit, I do actually want to stop and talk about the arrow quiver, the first of 2 accessories that drape around his torso. I've used these arrow quivers before. They are actually from Brick Warriors, and I sand the front of them over and smooth them over to paint on whatever detail I need to do. And this is definitely the most detailed Hawkeye arrow quiver I have ever done. I mean, I think this took like 2 days of on and off work, maybe a day and a half. I mean, it was a lot, and I tried to keep it as accurate as I could, and I'm overall just so proud of it. I think it really tops off the minifigure, and I'm glad I took the time to make sure I painted that to the best of my ability. Of course, now we can go back to focusing on the rest of the suit. And as you might have noticed, these shoulder pauldrons do kind of stick out a little bit and are pretty noticeable. These are actually made of cardstock and were glued in place, and I was able to paint all the necessary detail onto those, and I'm really happy with how those turned out as well. And now though, to give you a look at the arms a bit more and focus more on these, I essentially tried to pack in as much detail as I could, and it was not easy cramming in all that detail. It really started to feel like I was painting an Iron Man suit, but it was definitely worth it, and all that detail does wrap around. I also have a pair of tiny tactical glove tops attached to Hawkeye's arms, along with painted detail on the hands as well. But also, we do have this zipper design running down the center of the torso, this painted belt buckle, all of this fully sealed over because those buckles are multiple layers of paint. And then also the waist cape is actually a modified, trimmed up, and fully painted Cape Madness waist cape. And I also glued some 3D elements onto the front of those to keep it consistent with the rest of the torso, kind of extending that design down onto the separate waist cape piece. So going ahead and splitting the minifigure in half to give you a look at this waist cape and sort of how it drapes over the legs. You can see if I go ahead and unravel it here, I just realized I glued it together, so never mind. It is stuck like this in this position so that it doesn't look weird on the back, but all that detail is fully wrapped all the way around, and I think turned out looking really cool. And while we have that off, we can focus on the legs really quick. And as you can see, the legs are pretty self-explanatory. It was just a lot of line work and a lot of straight lines, which is not always fun. I've been doing this a long time, man, but painting lines is still always going to be tedious. And I did my best to keep them looking as consistent as I could, going around all 4 sides of the minifigure's legs. And I also did more to sort of add a bit more boot detail on the rims of each of the legs. And I think that goes a long way in adding that much more detail to this minifigure. And then obviously the knee pads are hyper detailed and were not easy to pull off either, but were definitely worth it and as accurate as I could make them. And then those little designs on each toe actually have 2 separate lines that are very close together, and it was just a lot of lines, a lot of painted detail, but all ultimately worth it in the end. Now, disassembling Hawkeye here for a second to give you a look at those alternate Ronin accessories. The sword sheath is actually a custom cardstock piece with a few mini-mates pieces attached to the front, being glued on and fully painted over. Again, the exact same strap used here from Cape Madness, fully painted with my own buckles, the exact same buckles, and I tried to make them look basically identical. And draping this over the minifigure in the exact same way, now we can apply the Ronin head with the full hood and the ski mask. This is actually a custom piece that I got in from a Shapeways store, recommended to me by Chris McLovin over on Instagram. He used it for his minifigure and I knew it would work perfect for mine. It was super rough though, and I explained this in the making of video. It required an immense amount of grinding and sanding and cleaning up before I could actually paint it. It was a lot of thick layers of paint and sealant and various other things to get it to look as smooth as it does here, because originally it did not look like this. And then after all of that was done, was I able to paint on all of the detail that you see wrapping around the entirety of it. But if we go ahead and remove it, one thing I had to do as well was carve out the inside and apply some smooth paint in there to keep it safe for this painted ski mask. Now, for the most part, this is almost fully painted by me. I used an Eclipse Graphics balaclava head as the base and then painted over the eye sections. And basically the only thing I really kept was the gray outline around the eyes and these little marks that you see in between the breather area. And I think it really helped in focusing my paint work and essentially really making sure that I was keeping it as clean as I could, instead of just basically painting all of it freehand and just starting from nothing. Using Victor's balaclava head helped quite a bit here. And I did my best to keep the face, aka the eyes there, as consistent as I could with the Jeremy Renner likeness. And so I think it turned out looking really awesome in the end. And finally, if we go ahead and pull the sword out of the sheath, you can see this is just a custom modified Lego katana. I basically cut down the wrist guard, cut down the blade, and then painted the separated lines that you see on both sides of it. And it turned out looking really awesome in the end. And to conclude this segment, we'll go ahead and get Ronin into a cool little pose here. But I'm so glad that after starting out as sort of a minion for Loki in the original Avengers film, Hawkeye went on to be one of the most developed Avengers of the original 6, and I cannot wait for his Disney Plus series.
It's okay.
Please.
Hey! Are you happy? She's dead! Where's the damn stone?
You failed to sacrifice her yourself. Therefore, it did not count.
Okay, there it is, the second Avengers Endgame showcase. As always, got a little more for you after the outro, but thanks for watching, guys. Thank you again for being so patient. We're in 2020 now, and new showcases are on the way. And if you'd like to see the full updated 2020 roadmap, progress posts on every new figure as I work on them, or behind the scenes for this video, you can always check out the Patreon page, or as always, almost all of my edits and all of the teasers go up on social, which is always linked below. All of that happening way before any of it reaches the main channel here. But what did you think though? None of my work is ever perfect, but like I said, I'm pretty proud of these two, and I love these two all throughout the first 10 years. Natasha and Clint were the brother and sister dynamic of the Avengers and the MCU, and both ScarJo and Renner have been amazing fulfilling their roles over the years, and I'm just really glad Widow is getting her own solo film soon, and I really hope everything works out with the Hawkeye series, because I definitely want to see these two exit the MCU completely the right way, and I think that's a pretty good note to end on. I've got more customizing to do, guys, getting started on Smart Hulk and Thor, like I said at the beginning of the video, and yeah, that's gonna do it. Thanks again, guys. Take care. Avengers Endgame project, celebrating, nope, a challenge, but definitely worth it as well, and hooray.
In order to take the stone, you must lose that which you love.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're not
like that anymore.
Well then, you cannot take the stone.
What? There has to be another way.
There is not.
Hey, we only had enough Pym particles to come here once, you red-faced. Oh my god, you're the Red Skull.
No, I am not.
Yes, you are. I've seen your face countless times in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s archives. How did you wind up here?
I am really sick and tired of this.
I absolutely love the Ronin outfit, and that's why I decided to use it and make it out of a... What am I talking about? I have ever made. I mean, it really had some devious... Okay. And I thought that that was the perfect design, and so I did... Is this bow on the wrong side? Yeah, it is. Great.
You know, I wish there was a way that I could let her know that we did it. We won.
She knows. Because I told her.
What?
Banner said changing the past doesn't change the future, so he sent me to go back and get her.
But Banner told me the sorcerer lady said...
Hey, Clint.
All right, so Clint Barton in the Hawkeye Ronin... What? Are on the way, and if you'd like to see the...